Hi, everybody. It's Colette Baron-Reid, and you will notice a beautiful face here on screen with me as well, too. This is very amazing astrologer Deborah Silverman, who also happens to be my BFF. And Deb and I talked, and we thought, you know what? Let's do something like this for these guys. Now, you don't know that I make predictive readings, that I used to do this for a living, and I used to use the Universal Weight Tarot in my readings with people. And I do this every single year for myself, and my husband and I know that I do this. And but you don't, so we decided to share that with you this year and add the astrology piece, which kind of gives it, I would say, really roots it in grounded science. Whoa. And we are going to be goofy all along with this very unique.
Told me that I'm grounded and rooted in science, said the astrologer, but it's true.
So the two together, the intuitive and that, I mean, there's a system that works together here, the tarot with astrology, and we're going to offer this to you today. And the way this works best is if I have a person in front of me. So I am reading, and Deb is reading 2021, as if 2021 was a being in front of the two of us, and we doubled up, just like we used to do on radio, and really have a talk with 2021, the person. So you are going to watch this. Right, Deb?
Right, Colette.
All right, so just in case one person amongst these thousands of people watching might not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Deb?
A little bit about myself. So for the last over 40 some years, I have been an astrologer, and I have a master's in clinical psychology. So I've combined astrology and psychology, and I'm in love with the tarot cards, because did you know that the 22 major arcana, 10 of them are planets and 12 of them are signs? So they knew back in the 15th century to leave cards for Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus. They didn't even find it back then. So astrology and tarot are best friends, and so are Colette and I. So put us together, and what do you get? And my background is sharing information to prepare us, similar to Colette, to be able to stand steady and be prepared so you're not overwhelmed like what happened in 2020.
Right. And isn't it funny that you and I talked at the beginning of 2020 and both of us knew something was coming, but we didn't know what it was? We were having those conversations. I had the same conversation with Robert Ohado. We're like, I don't know what's happening this year, but something's happening. And then
astrology definitely saw the Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction. That was like, what's that going to look like? So it's leaving, just an announcement. December 21st, they left Capricorn. Jupiter and Saturn both left. So we're in a whole new conversation.
With Aquarius.
Yes.
Okay. So let's get going with just starting. I just want to give you an overview of the 6 months in general. Then I want to focus in on January. I'm going to hand it over to Deb. Then I'll do February, hand it to Deb. So we're going to kind of play ball together to show you what we see coming up. So for those of you who are interested in the tarot, I say tarot, I'll mix up those words once in a while because I kind of like the way they both sound. Pick one, no. Anyway, so I look at the four corners of a reading. I look at the center two cards. Then I look crisscross, crisscross, crisscross. I look at the lines going across. I look at them going this way. So it's like I see a grid of information. So not one card stands out alone. They're always read in relationship to the other. So these two go together, these two go together, those four go together, these two, etc. So don't try and figure it out. I'm not teaching you how to do this, but I just want to let you know this is where I'm getting the information from. Plus, my vision is what comes up for me. So as if I'm seeing the spirit of this person in front of me, I'm reading what I feel from the spirit of 2021 and what I could say to them. So here we go. Now, the two cards in the center of this reading give us the theme for the first 6 months of the year. Now, I'm only asking or intending to look at the first 6 months of the year to tell us what theme are we entering 2021 with, and what can we expect in terms of energy? So we come in with a broken heart. So I've got these Three of Swords here, triangulation, which means that there's a lack of synergy and balance and coherence just in the beginning of the year. Because what what is helping it, this is a support card, is actually endings plus new beginnings at the same time. So we are going to say goodbye in 2021, just in the entire year. At some point during the year, we're going to really get that we have moved beyond what was initiated for us in 2020. So we want to get prepared for those endings and new beginnings that are all kind of happening in a mishmash way and really start to take root at the middle point of the year. So the other thing is here, so if we look at the four corners of the first 6 months, we're also looking at the Magician, the Ace of Pentacles, the Ace of Wands, and the Page of Pentacles. So if I start at the bottom, which is the kind of, where we want the foundation to be, this is about all of our capacity to communicate. This sets a good, solid foundation. So we're communicating our healing, right? We're really trying to communicate what is going to work best for all. Very much that concept of unity and diversity shows up for us here. Good, solid foundations, but not a huge headway in the first 6 months of the year, but seeds being planted. What is going to be a huge thing for everybody this year is first of all, the economy being ill for a period of time and then regenerating. And also a huge year for new artistic ways of expressing ourselves. So this is also the spirituality, the material world, good solid foundations, as well as the ability to communicate our needs. So I don't want to give you a doomy and gloomy reading for 2021, but we want to be prepared for the fact that this is not going to be easy peasy. We're not all of a sudden go, oh my God, thank God 2020 is over. In fact, we're starting out the January months with some more difficult imagery. So Deb, do you want to say anything in general first? Do you want me to just jump into January and then you talk about January after?
Well, just from an astrological point of view, we come into this new year slowly and bumpy. It gets better. So I want to just put that, because to your point, I don't want to be gloomy, but there is some really rough patch in January, which I'll let you begin. Astrologically, there is some significant disruption in January, and then it does get better as spring comes on. So let's put that out first, so that we can reduce the anxiety, because it is a little, if we would have seen 2020 coming, we would have said the same thing, but it was much worse in 2020.
Yeah, this is nowhere near as bad. Yeah. So let's start with January, and then we're going to just look at the tarot. My take on that, remember 2021 is sitting in front of me. I'm going, listen, honey, the beginning of this year, you got to hunker down a little bit. You are saying goodbye to the unavailable partner. Now, what's very interesting is the energy of that which we can't totally have is on its way out. So if you've ever had a relationship with somebody who dangles himself in front of you like a carrot, and you've been like, why don't they love me? That kind of a sense of longing and yearning for completion. So this leaves, that would have been a big theme for 2020, that we can't quite get to where we need to go. Anywhere, right? Nothing is working. Now here we're seeing that energy leave. And so we can negotiate things a lot better, given that we have lessons that we have learned from 2020 that we're still dealing with in January of 2021. And the bumpiness that, and I'm dying to hear what Deborah has to say about the type of bumpiness, but here we have the Page of Swords, which represents gossip, criticism, a sense of this is media, this is how we speak to each other. There's still that a stabbing quality in January, and a real instability that will, as long as we take responsibility for that, and again, that takes time. I'm just saying, like, listen, this is going to set the stage for you. So these are the ways that you would need to prepare yourself, is like really planting seeds slowly of what you know you need, making the reparations, because you have the Four of Swords, which is the card of, I call it the hospital card. So it's the healing card, it's the health card, it's the health of your soul. It's not just issues around health and well-being. It's well-being that's more holistic. So what can you do and what can you commit to while all this other stuff is going on? So you can't still trust the conditions that you see in front of you. It really is going to still be an inside job as we enter into 2021. Deb, let's add more to January.
So for the last 6 months of the end of 2020, Mars was in Aries. And on January 6th, it enters Taurus. So we've reduced that pressure of being feisty and arguing and fighting with your partner to now it's like stability. Okay, so Mars entered Taurus. However, from the 6th all the way to the end of January, not only is Mars in Taurus, but Mars is conjunct Uranus, which is a very electric and disruptive financially. I'm predicting a financial challenge for the world during the month of January, complemented, no, tension with Saturn is in Aquarius. So here's Taurus, and
Right.
Saturn is 90 degrees away, so it's literally like a square. Saturn and Jupiter are going to square Mars the whole month of from early January all through the end of January. So January astrologically, especially the inauguration, the 20th of January, is a very difficult moment. It's a lot of tension politically. It's a lot of tension financially with Taurus not getting along with Aquarius. So it's like our society, as you're describing, this is really one of the highest pitch of the whole new year. January really comes in with oh my God, we're dealing with the returning cycle. We're trying to make the shift. There's a lot of tension in the air because there's two public, it's Republicans and Democrats hating each other during the inauguration. So I'm predicting a lot of tension and real discomfort, and it won't last. But
Right.
January, to your point, is a very tense month, specifically about the political tension and the economic tension.
Towards the end of January, when you said that January 20th, you mentioned that even though Taurus feels like it's slowing down, so there's less divisiveness is what I'm seeing, but there's still like the kind of the leftover divisions. Like, how are we going to manage the coming together February and March? So here I'm seeing the need to reach across, the need to find some kind of balance. It also shows strange bedfellows in February. So when I say strange bedfellows, if we look at this as 2021, we're speaking to the planet year, say you're my client, 2021. You happen to live on the Earth, right? So on the strangest way, there's going to be, we might see things like big giant countries that we think usually are enemies they come together because they have to, or it's going to be an interesting, strange bedfellows, right? We don't know how that's going to play out. Go ahead, Deb.
Because there's so much Aquarius in the sky. So Sun will be in Aquarius, Jupiter will be Aquarius, Saturn Aquarius, Venus Aquarius. So Aquarius is the sign in February, to your point, that creates community.
Oh,
that goes past diversity. They celebrate weird and different. And so now now that's the beginning of us humanitarians, if this in fact wins. My prayer is the humanitarian influence becomes part of our consciousness rather than the divisiveness and the separation that we've lived with for the last 2.5 years with Capricorn, which was so opinionated. Now we're in a community energy, and it starts strongly with with Venus. I'm going to start with Venus in Aquarius, Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, and the Sun in Aquarius. So during the early parts of February, we've got a very community-oriented New Age spirituality. Come study with us. This is all the time for us to go online and find ourselves inspired to not see differences, but actually see where we're connected.
And I love that. That's why I was saying, even though we're starting out with your reading with saying, listen, January is going to be super tense and there could be some economic burps here and there, but it does right itself. And I think in a way, we tend to respond mostly when someone's in trouble, right? We just like, oh, so it's like we're still in trouble when we walk into 2021, everybody is. But then February comes in like, okay, well, how do we as a community? And it's something that's really interesting because it's not something that we wake up one day and say, I think I will start to think that way. It's because we're influenced to think this way. So if we're already going in this direction, and the fact that there's so much Aquarian planets as well too, talks about it's about internet, cyber communities, and also getting out of the echo chamber because Aquarius is inclusive. It's so inclusive. And what's so interesting too with this section here about what comes up is we still will see a lot of those echo chambers growing and trying to communicate, but it's almost like they eat themselves. So if you have something that's not working for the whole, it will not survive as well. So we won't know what that is until we start to see it. But I'm more interested in how these communities come together because it's a service month. It's really that, how do we bring this forward? So just notice that your thinking is likely going to change anyway, entering into February, not because anything outside of you made you like that, but because you start to wake up to this. And isn't that Uranus the Great
The
Awakener?
last time this happened, there was 5 planets in Aquarius, was 1963. So think back to the 60s. We are returning to a time when we have to open our minds, release all the old bondage of what came before, start considering new ways of doing the economy, new ways of being together. We're in a brand new world. Aquarius is here for the month of February. Dun, da, da, da. Now, it can be, the negative side is they're not human and they
Right.
cut
It's a
off
little discompassionate.
and living in cyberspace more than physical touch. So that could continue, although I imagine that by then the vaccine is out and we are definitely moving into another wave without the COVID thing. And we're being invited into new kinds of communities. So that's why
Yeah.
you're here. That's why Colette and I are having so much fun, because we're that is the Aquarian age,
Yeah.
February.
And I think what's really interesting about this as well, too, I mean, like we don't want to only just gloss over, we want to bring the shadow piece up too. So the shadow piece here is it's revelatory as well. So it's revealing the shadow. It's like bringing community. It's kind of like now we're looking at repairing. Like we've illuminated the shadow. Now it's about reparations. And that is also what gets kickstarted again in February. Now in March, isn't it cool how the tarot, the reading actually works with the astrology? It's very cool. Just for those people who want to know how I'm getting this information, I'm looking this way. These each month has its own 3 cards, but then I look at the influences that are overarching influences, which I add into the reading when I talk to Deb, et cetera, et cetera. So you might know where you might see some of the stuff that I'm seeing, but you won't know that I'm also looking at this card here and this card there. Okay, so March, this is what's really interesting, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this, and maybe your astrology will tell us a little bit more about that. But it represents a different type of generosity, and I do think it has to do with the economy. So this is looking at banking, for example, or lending and how we interact with each other around prosperity. And I always talk about compassionate prosperity and how that's based on contribution as opposed to, the accumulation of things. But this is a really interesting new way of looking at how we manage our money. So I don't know what your thing is going to say there, but this is also about new beginnings in terms of learning. Very, very, very successful for businesses that are online as well. So we move from the Aquarius because we started here. It's still influencing March. So not only are there going to be opportunities in different communities of how we share, about how, like the shared wealth of community. That's also showing up here. But also the Hermit is also the teacher. It's the, what are we learning? What did we learn and how are we teaching it? And this is really nice because it says whatever we put down in March is going to be supportive for the future. So Deb, I'm going to.
That's so interesting, Colin, because Mars leaves Taurus the second week. It's actually the first week on the 5th of March. So for the whole of February, we were talking about money, and it was disruptive because Mars was in Taurus, squaring the Aquarius. It enters Gemini, and it trines all the Aquarius. So now we're talking more about being more open-minded, communicating, creating new systems. It's not so blocked. During those earlier months, by March, there's a flow. Mars is in Gemini, the generosity you spoke to, supporting all the Aquarius. And there's so much support coming later on in the month as we go into, during March, we leave Pisces. By the end, we get into Aries, and then it's really open-minded. So the Pisces and the Mars and Gemini and the ability for us to not be caught in the tension, March has actually a softer, more fluid energy than January and February did. So it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah, I love that. This, for those of you who are looking, this is not the line that I read for a month. This is actually the influence cards that tells us, what are some of the things going on, the hidden influences. And here is the level of insecurity that some people enter April with. So that we're seeing kind of almost like this PTSD in some way, right? Of having to heal the PTSD of the experiences that we've had the past 18 months. But we get a chance to really start something new, but really face all the losses and really do take stock. So as much as, and in a way, I guess Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, right? So we're entering into the new beginning. This is like the spring. So, and here it's victory over these things, having made choices. Like this is the whole year, we're looking at healing our broken hearts, new beginnings, dealing with our insecurities, and making choices that we didn't have before, and also recognizing that some of the choices are being made for us, because with all this new Aquarian energy that came in, we're starting to see things so differently anyway. So we're not fighting for it as much as how do we make it work? Right? So it's how do we make this happen? Now, what I love about April is that we are getting a gift. The 10 of Cups comes in April, the theme of April. And I think this could be potentially the end of COVID. It could be potentially the celebration of things turning around in such a way that everybody is included in this. There's victory over difficulties, and it's also travel. So there's a lot, maybe, who knows, maybe that this is a month that people can start moving around again a little bit more, but it definitely feels like a lot of movement in April.
It's so funny because the sun will be in Aries.
Yep.
And then we have Mars is still in Gemini. We have Jupiter in Aquarius. It's all fire and air. So where we were stuck in that Earth for 2020 was so much Capricorn. We've now moved over. We've now moved over to fire and air. So when you put an Aries and an Aquarius in the room, the only challenge I would speak to is there is this Neptune is in Pisces squaring Mars by the middle of April. That's a little bit of a with Mars and Gemini feeling so excited, Neptune and Pisces getting a little confused because there's so much newness. That's what I want to say.
Right. That's
It's almost like here comes spring. There's opportunities. We are feeling energized. We're not feeling the constriction. We're feeling optimism for the first time.
Yep.
We would really say that April has just as you described, fire and air, energetics coming back up. Mercury's in Aries, Venus is in Aries, the early part, Sun's in Aries, Jupiter in Aquarius. It's a lot of fire and air. Like finally. Yeah. We're out from under the effect of being so.
Yeah, it feels like we're having a big, like a celebration, right? We're out in the streets screaming, yay.
You have to realize that from the month of March, when COVID started until January, Mars was stuck in Aries for 6 months. Yeah. So starting February and March, and now Mars is finally going to come out of Gemini into Cancer at the end. But during April, Mars in Gemini, Sun in Aries, Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, we're having fun.
Yeah, right? It says
it. We've had ever before in a long time.
We have not had this much fun in so long. Yeah. And so this is why we wanted to show this all to you when you start freaking out in January, like, oh my God, we're going to have another year like that. We're not.
Yes.
We're not. We're not. It is going to be rocky to start. Now, let's go into May. Now, when the Queen of Cups crowns May, it's that there's a nurturing quality to this month. There's a real sense of, I feel nurtured, I can nurture others, but because we came out of this celebratory, optimistic month of April, we're still there. So there's a sense that I can trust and new businesses. So it's a really good time as well, temporarily. Again, if you're on the internet, if you've been able to move a lot of your business to online, and again, I'm just saying what I see in general here, you're doing really well. And then, but this is also back, could be that brick and mortars are open up again and stuff. And it's not going to be an overnight recovery, but it does say here is that we're starting to feel like we can do it. May is also a month of temperance, but temperance is art. So for me, it's also about it's patience, is allowing your art to come through you. There's going to be a lot of people with a lot of things to say, in such a way that it is beautiful. It's this expression of artists and musicians, and it's like what happens, like it's a renaissance again.
So it's so funny you say that because Mars goes into Cancer, and you were talking about nurturing. Oh, so wow. Mars enters Cancer for the first time in 2 years, starting as early May. It has a very powerful influence because it's supporting Taurus. There's a lot of, humanitarian kind of gentleness that happens. The challenge is Saturn and Uranus are doing a very tight square. Now, this is a interesting once every, I'm going to say 30 years. It's a challenging time globally. Saturn squaring Uranus. The tradition of Saturn, which is Aquarius, not very traditional, trying to bring us the future, and the old attachment that Uranus has to Taurus, to the old memories of how it was, there's a clash. Because the new is trying to come forward in the Aquarian energy, but the Taurus is like, no, I want to feel safe. So there's a conflict, and that's very strong in the month of May, and that could show up globally. That could
Yeah.
be disruption. That's a very uncomfortable combination, Saturn squaring Uranus. The good news is you described, Mars is entering Taurus, which is really good. And then there's a lot of Gemini energy in May. So we're talking, we're communicating, we're researching, we're getting a little spinny. I would say I'm a little worried about May as far as how do you do self-care with that Mars and Cancer while there's so much tension? Yes, we may get back online. People are starting to think about traveling, but there's an undercurrent in the global atmosphere that makes us feel really insecure. What is that? I don't know.
And the insecurity was brought up also in April, right? So remember I said we enter into it with a sense of insecurity, and that doesn't go overnight. We still have the PTSD that's in the center of the reading.
That's true.
Right.
And just so you know, all during March, April, May, that Saturn-Uranus square exists. And that's all about, as you were describing, the futuristic possibilities of working new businesses, being online, opening up our minds, and then Taurus saying, I'm scared. And I want the old story. We're caught between letting the COVID have had its influence, but not knowing what the new normal is. And that's what's going on during May and June.
Yeah, I love that. What also is that we are learning. So we have to enter into June in beginner mind. And I actually love that you brought that up because I forgot to mention that when the Queen of Cups comes in a reading, when I do the tarot, it is about self-care. So it's not just to nurture, it's about nurturance in general. So are we taking good care of ourselves? Because we might have got a little too excited in April, you know what I mean? And yippee, oh boy, and we don't have it 100% yet. So June is sobering again, but it has tremendous creative opportunities. So if we look at June, we go from May to June again with we see the artistic possibilities, right? Because the last card goes to the next one. Ways, remember you said the Gemini influence, which is about communicating, but could be singing, writing.
Guess what else? Jupiter, for the first time in 12 years, enters Pisces. That is the artist.
Yeah, the artist. There you go.
During June, it enters actually the very middle of May, but it's at 1 degree in June. So this is the artist you're talking about.
Why don't you do June now, and then I'll tell you what the cards mean for June.
Well, June is the first degree of Pisces for the first time in 12 years. All you Pisces out there, you're going to love this. Just what you're saying, the artist, the music, the creativity is starting to flourish. The woo-woo stuff, we are going to have a party. Aquarius, the detached place, and now it's coming into creativity and being able to feel energetics. So it's a highly sensitive time. But to your point, June is like if you had some creative pieces that you let put behind, and you were a Pisces or you were a Virgo or you were a Taurus. This is the time during June to say, you know what, I'm going to carve out some quiet to do my creativity. It's a very conducive time. The musical side, all that you're describing.
Yeah. So the other thing that I have for June, because it is a cornerstone, one of the cards is the Page of Pentacles, which is that we start to put down real foundations and we start to see tangible evidence of the work we put in. So we don't want to scare you and say that, you know, everything is going to pot, because it isn't. In fact, we can rely on the Taurus, the difficult tension around Taurus that Deb was describing was about holding on to the past. So we know the stuff that doesn't work. And the fact is that we do know that. So although there may be some resistance to change, we actually can put down a little bit more of a solid foundation in June as a result of this is a kind of a roller coaster ride in the first 6 months of 2021, but we are moving forward 1000%. This is not backward movement. This is not creating more and more tension worse than last year. That is behind us. If anything, it's the kind of, we want relief so badly that when we get a minute of it, we just go all out and then we realize, what, you're taking it away from me? Right? So it's like,
I want to highlight that. Don't say that you've gotten so frustrated by what you left behind. Rewrite the story and
rewrite the story.
Reality. It might be a different reality. We're not traveling as much. We're being more self-conscious about how much we do. We're taking care of the kids, because this is definitely a creative zone, June.
It is. It's beautiful. So as much as that there are some, you know, difficulties also, again, I would say when something grows out of a lot of mulch, right? You need a lot of shit to put in that garden there, okay? I would look at this too and say nothing is wasted. If anything, we're just adding more mulch to the garden. And then, Deb, we're not going to do the post 6 months. Deb and I'll get together in maybe May or June again and do this again. But I think what we wanted for you guys, both of us, Deb as the brilliant astrologer, psychologist that she is, and me, I'm just doing this tarot spread that I only did by myself, for myself for years, and my clients when I used to do this full time. But, is to give you a snapshot of what we believe is coming in terms of the energetic influence everybody's under, but also some good advice about how to cope with it. One thing I am going to say to you is that I am getting that there's going to be some type of reset around currencies. So, and I'm not sure, it's like, I also see pictures and images coming off this as a grid. So I look at the cards, they go like this at me, and then they go ding. So for me, this is about maybe that the whole world needs a global reset in terms of the right currency values, et cetera, because something has
Uranus
gone.
and Taurus. That is Uranus. Uranus changes Taurus's currency.
Is
Uranus,
it?
yes, it rules money, Taurus. And Uranus just entered there, and it's radically being effective, especially in January. I'm so curious to see. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, so we'll see if it's a hyperinflation that has gone on in some countries, but it could go on across the world, and that's why there needs to be a reset. And why I said that there looks like strange bedfellows. So people, as I said, countries that are normally in the news as enemies may all of a sudden say, "Hey, we need to do this together." So it is an interesting new way of seeing community for the early part of 2021 and how it impacts us in terms of economics, in terms of our currency values, in terms of everything. I do feel that 2021, the beginning of 2021, it's the beginning of a big reset. Even if they're talking behind closed doors, we outed them.
Yeah, I think the American economy specifically, because it affects the world's economy, is going to go through a really rough patch when Uranus squares Saturn in Taurus to Aquarius. And then we will get a chance, as you described, to change our whole nature.
And I really want to focus on the reset here too, because it doesn't take long for the reset. There's like a really quick response here. The other thing is that I think is fascinating is up in this quadrant here, that there's going to be discoveries in health. Now, this could be 10 different types of vaccines. It could be somebody finds a cure for cancer. It could be, this just really focused here that there is a cure, and it does come out of a learning institution. So something that somebody is studying right now is being opened. The other thing that I'm looking at here as well too is some kind of a shift in technology that is so drastic. So it could be new laws, rules. It's ruling the way that we communicate through technology. So we can also see an impact there. Again, it's for the greater whole, greater good. It is about revealing things around what I see the shadow of technology. So I mean, this is going to be interesting. And I know this is never coming out of my mouth. Usually none of you guys ever hear me talk about UFOs, but I'm going to say this is also like this kind of disclosure. I'm wondering if this happens as well in the first 6 months of 2021, because it does show up here that there's things that are otherworldly that I'm getting that. But you tell me. Okay, so Deb, tell me what you see.
So right, Jupiter in Aquarius and then Jupiter in Pisces, like for the first time in 12 years. We're bringing down a higher frequency. Would be no surprise at all that the technology would allow us to be able, it's just a dependency on whether or not our minds are open enough, because they can't afford to talk to us because we've been so scared. But now, just what you and I are doing here today, we're opening up minds. We're expanding possibilities. We're talking about UFOs. That is Jupiter at Aquarius.
Right? It's like, I don't never say UFOs. Oh my God, my videos, not one of you have ever seen me say that. But it does feel that way. My father would be so proud. He raised us on Eric von Däniken.
As an Aquarian. Your dad was an Aquarian.
My dad, oh my God, yes, he made sure we knew that there were UFOs, that they were real. Now, here's what's also very interesting too, in terms of the bigger picture as I see it. I also see that there is a very different way that we recalibrate physically. So I think that we've been in some very weird
bondage.
Right. It's a bondage to an old, not just a thinking. So we think of thinking, we think of intellect, but it's really more how we resonate. It's much more on an energetic level. So I know I'm talking very new age foo-foo here, but this is true. I'm seeing a raising of vibration where we start to have much more access to downloads from where you're saying like, where did I come up with that? So it's like this kind of crash course in intuition that's happening to a lot of people.
That starts in May. So all from January till May, Jupiter's in Aquarius. It's openness to vibration. When it enters Pisces, the downloads,
Yeah.
the openness, the receptivity, the changing of our frequency, the ability for us to sit still. Look at after COVID, if you learn nothing else, I learned I don't have to travel so much. I can sit.
Yeah.
That was brand new. So that's the entrance of us changing our frequency by not being so externally oriented and starting to go in. And that's Jupiter in Pisces.
I love that. And so it's very interesting that the astrology and the tarot, just on a timeline basis, were so connected, because it does feel like when people get so into their art and the expression of the art, which is May, June, and May, April, May, and June, really, but that there's this whole new, we're downloading all this information. So if you're a writer, if you're an artist, this is when you're going to start getting so inspired. So I'm excited about that, because it does feel like this is also in entertainment. There's going to be a change in the way that we experience entertainment and stories that we get exposed to. This is radically going to shift this year. We'll see the results of that like in a year or 2 years, because this is all the stuff that's being made now that we don't access right away. So we're going to see everything that's been brewing last year, this year, right? There's a correlation between what went on and what people created last year, this year and next year. And then we're starting to see this fascinating shift in the way we tell stories. Lots more magic, lots more playfulness, lots more genuineness. There's a sense of, I think we've been missing that. And I know that at the beginning of the year, it does feel a little cold, with that, the shadow of Aquarius in that way. There's not as much compassion as we have to really muster it. But then it starts to really get into play mid to later in this first half of the 6 months. Deb.
And I really think that astrology and your work and my work with Jupiter in Aquarius and Jupiter in Pisces, for any of you that are flirting with the idea, this is 2021 is the year with Jupiter and Saturn and this whole Aquarian influence to say, yes, I'm open-minded and I can come out of the closet.
Yes.
Because we were scared to do all this. It's a popular point of view. It's what you're talking about, changing the frequency. It's no longer scary.
Yeah. And it's really much more about what is real, and what is practical. And one of the things Deb and I share is our practical application of these things. Like, how do you make this a practice? How do you make this practical? How do you make astrology and oracles and tarot a practice so that you can track and navigate your day to day and understand, what are some of the influences that are going to impact us so that we're not unaware, right? I get it. This is what's going on. So this is the best way for me to get coherent with my energy and the energy of the collective.
And that is why you're watching this, you guys. You're trying to align with an astrologer and a reader, a psychic, a magical being, to figure out how to heighten your vibration so you can open your mind to considering the cosmos and the cards. And that entrance allows you to change the matrix that came before. So that's the good news about the Aquarian age. We are Saturn in Aquarius. We are in the Aquarian age. The future has arrived. It's no longer 60 miles east of here. It's in your house.
It's in your house.
We're in the future. We're inside of a computer talking about magic as though that was normal.
I know. Think about it, right?
I want to say the new year is a slow start, but as you can see, come spring, and certainly by April and May, and then slightly in June, it's much softer. So just be aware it's not going to be easy transition from where you are now, early January, end of December, through the first few months are clunky.
Yeah, but they're not as bad as last year. That's what we have to remember. So don't get into the PTSD of like, oh my God, it's going to be as bad. It's not necessarily true, but it is going to be a little rocky, and we have to maintain that we are in a process. It's like being that little caterpillar still stuck in the cocoon, not knowing if he's going to actually get wings or if he's going to fall out the cocoon and go splat. Right? So, wings are coming. We just are still stuck in there for a little bit longer.
Yes, and don't lose faith. That's why we're here. We're here to encourage your faith and to let you know that it does work when you keep your space clean and your eyes open and your heart open. this is how magic occurs, by keeping
Yeah.
this interest conversation, like, how can I be of service? That's our
Yeah.
ultimate question.
It is. It's about contribution this year. That's all the Aquarius. It's about how can we contribute to reduce the suffering in the world for ourselves and others. So, Deb, where can everybody get a hold of you or your school?
If you're watching this at the end of December, early January, the school opens in early February. So you can just go to Deborah Silverman Astrology, DEBRA, silvermanastrology.com. We have a school starting in January, and we have all kinds of daily information about the stars. And come find me. I definitely have a whole team of women who are delighted to celebrate with you the uplifted version of how to look up.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to do together. We're going to hold hands and look up to the stars and remember that we were born of stardust and grace. Take care.
I love that. Thank you, Colette.